Howdy. It's been a minute. I could tell you why I haven't posted anything on here in, I believe it's almost a year now, but it's just kind of a long, depressing story, so I think I'd rather just talk about some robots. So, let's get into it. Transformers 1 is the latest installment in the Transformers franchise, and it's actually peak cinema. So, there had been talk of a animated Transformers movie set on Cybertron for years before the release of this movie. I believe I remember hearing rumblings or something like that, even back around the time Bumblebee came out. So it's been a good 5-6 years, maybe longer, maybe shorter. I don't know. My memory's not always the best. So the idea of that was always something I was very interested in, and to be honest, had me very excited. Because, a Transformers movie set fully on Cybertron during the days of the war, that's something that a lot of people wanted for a very long time, and I myself even thought that it would be sick. But in about the last year or so, I want to say, around the time the voice cast got announced, so I think that was like probably April of 2023, something like that, I have become very slightly worried about the quality of this movie. Slightly. I still thought it was going to be good, and I was still very excited for it. But the reason the voice cast had me slightly worried was because you look at it, and it's all big names. There's no voice actors from other Transformers media like Peter Cullen, Frank Welker, which isn't a bad thing. I'm fine with new voices for these characters. It happens all the time. I'm very open to it. But the reason them being big names worried me because it just seemed like celebrity stunt casting. Like they didn't think Transformers itself would be enough to pull in money, so they were like, oh, we have to get all these huge stars like Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Lawrence Fishburne. So that had me slightly worried. Hey, I'm just sitting here editing this video, and I'm realizing I don't really think I worded what my concerns were correctly. I made it sound like Paramount didn't think the movie would bring in money unless they casted big names, which is not what my concern was. My concern was that they didn't think the movie's quality was good enough to stand on its own. So that's why they had to bring in the big celebrity names like Chris Hemsworth. Just wanted to clear that up because it's something I noticed when I was editing. Alright, see ya. But even then, it wasn't something that I was super, miffed about. Even back when it came out, or when the castings got announced, I made a video about it. And I was, slightly concerned, but I was basically saying, let's at least hear them in the roles first before we jump to conclusions and start judging them. So the first cast member I wanted to talk about is honestly probably the most controversial one. The new voice of Optimus Prime is Chris Hemsworth, Thor himself. So a little bit of context is this movie is about the early days of not the early days of Cybertron, but before the war started, when Optimus and Megatron were still allies, when Optimus, I'm pretty sure, was still Orion Pax. He might be Optimus in this, but I think he's Orion Pax. So with that context, he is playing a younger Optimus Prime. And I know a lot of people immediately flinch at the idea of there being Optimus Prime and he's not voiced by Peter Cullen. But I don't hate this pick. I'm not in love with it yet. But I'm not immediately opposed to the idea of it. I'm very interested to see. I'm so slow. I'm very interested to see what Chris Hemsworth brings to the role. And, let's be honest, there are way worse picks. It could have been Chris Pratt. So that had me slightly worried, but I was still very optimistic about the movie. But anyways, aside from the voice casts, after that, about a year goes by, and there's not really much of anything in terms of news about it. We got some... I feel like some people saw, some... not screenings, because the movie wasn't done yet, obviously, but there were, leaks of stuff of what some of the designs might look like, and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was pretty quiet. At least on my front, I didn't hear a ton of stuff about it. And then, I believe it was last April, the first trailer releases. And it's not a bad trailer, but the tone that it was selling was, for lack of a better word, a bit more immature than I was hoping for.
Hi there, I'm B127. I'm actually working on some nicknames. The one I'm floating right now is Badassatron, which is actually pronounced Badassatron.
This is one of the first jokes in the trailer. It's within the first 15 seconds. I need you guys to understand that a lot of the general audience did not even know this movie was being made, so this trailer was their first exposure to its existence, and someone at Paramount thought this joke is one of the first things they should see to try to sell them on this movie. Jesus Christ. Which, you know, that sounds stupid probably because I'm talking about Transformers. It's a franchise that was made for kids. It was literally a cartoon that was just made to sell toys in the 80s. Most Transformers stuff is made for kids, but in some of it there's still a certain level of maturity to it, like something that kids and adults could enjoy, stuff like Transformers Prime, the War for Cybertron video games, just stuff like that. And once again, I'm not saying this trailer was bad or that it made the movie look bad, but it made it look much more aimed at a much, much younger audience. So that had me a bit worried. Then a few months go by and the second trailer releases. And I feel like this one did do a better job at capturing the tone of the movie, but still wasn't. It had me. Excuse me. At this point, this is probably the most worried I was about the quality of this movie. Like, after the second trailer dropped, even though it was a better trailer than the first one, I was still like a bit worried. I was super worried about the quality of the movie, because as a Transformers fan, you kind of get used to being disappointed. So I just really didn't want the movie to suck, but I was getting to the point of thinking it might not be great. I never thought it was going to be terrible, but I was like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. But then after the second trailer, I didn't really look at any more of the marketing because I was told from people, not directly, but just I've seen people who saw early screenings of the movie say that some of the later marketing stuff was like really spoilery, so I completely avoided it. So then, after all that waiting, all that worrying about the quality of the movie, it finally releases. And I went and saw it probably 2-3 weeks ago. And it is the best Transformers movie that has ever been made. By a mile. The first thing I want to talk about in regards to things about this movie that I absolutely loved, hey, it's me again. Sorry, I keep interrupting the video, but I keep noticing things that are bugging me. If you're wondering why for the rest of the video my tongue is an unnaturally bright shade of blue, it's because I was drinking Gatorade in between takes. Very, very unimportant detail, but felt like I should say something. Cast is basically perfect, and I want to start actually with Brian Tyree Henry as Megatron. Back when the cast got announced, he was one of the casting choices where the whole time I was like, oh yeah, he'd probably be a pretty good Megatron. I can see that. I was not prepared for just how great he is in this movie, especially in the like the second half of the second act and the entire third act of this movie. He's basically perfect. There's actually a scene at in the third act, and I feel like I should probably put a warning up now for anyone who hasn't seen it. This is a spoiler review. I'm gonna be talking about full spoilers, so you've been warned. Get out of here. But there's a scene in the third act of this movie where things have fully kicked off. He's no longer D16, he's Megatron. Orion Pax is no longer Orion Pax, he's Optimus Prime. And Megatron looks over a crowd of Cybertronians and he just screams the words, "I am Megatron," which is very simple. But Brian Tyree Henry's delivery of it is so perfect. He sounds like young Kratos, like T.C. Carson Kratos, and it's so perfect. Probably my favorite casting choice in this whole movie, if I'm being completely honest. Whoever's idea that was, give them all the money, because they deserve it. But while we're on the topic of great voice casting, someone else in this movie who completely surprised me, Chris Hemsworth. I'm not even joking, he might be one of my new favorite Optimus Prime voice actors. I mean, he's not Peter Cullen, obviously. Peter Cullen's the man. But Chris Hemsworth is a good Optimus Prime, and a great Orion Pax, but that's a little easier to nail down, I feel. But man, he's a good Optimus Prime. Like, surprisingly good. And that leaves the other two, Scarlett Johansson as Alita, and Keegan-Michael Key as Bumblebee, or B-127. They were both really good too. I did like Scarlett Johansson a lot as Alita, and Keegan-Michael Key as Bumblebee. I just don't really have as much to say about their performances. Just, they're good. They're good in the movie. I like them. Bumblebee, if we get a sequel, and I'm praying and hoping to God we get a sequel, maybe tone down the humor on Bumblebee just a little bit, because it feels like just about every other word out of his mouth is a joke, which I get. You need your comedy relief character, especially in a kid's movie or a family movie, but it's okay to have him not say a joke every 3 seconds. It's fine. Not saying I hated him or anything, just if we get a sequel, wouldn't mind if they took it down a notch. But credit where credit is due, Bumblebee does probably have the funniest joke in the movie, which is when it's at the end of the movie when Optimus is Optimus Prime. He's like the leader now, and he tells Bumblebee that he wants to keep him around, and Bumblebee's like, "Are you kidding me? This is amazing. I get to work for the government." That's a good joke. And one other thing before I move on from talking about the cast, another person who deserves a raise for whoever came up with this idea, Steve Buscemi is Starscream. The moment Starscream enters the movie, everything shifts, and it just like kicks up to 100. He's so good. Like, he doesn't have a ton of screen time, but what little he does, he's very memorable, and Steve Buscemi is really good in the role. Is it Buscemi or Buscemi? I've heard both. Whatever, the guy from Fargo, you know who I'm talking about. And now to move on to more the story side of things. If you don't know what this movie is about, and you're interested in it, well, number one, I don't know why you're watching this spoiler review of it. Go watch it. It's worth your time. But if you don't care about spoilers, the movie is about. It's basically an origin story for Optimus Prime and Megatron. How they start out as friends, and that slow path to them becoming enemies, and the start of the war that eventually destroys Cybertron. And that entire arc, that friendship to enemies, that entire storyline is handled so well in this movie. Just watching the slow descent of D16 into Megatron. Watching him slowly take that turn is just really good. Like, it's really interesting to watch. And on that same hand, watching Orion go from this reckless, rebellious miner to Optimus Prime. We all know Optimus Prime. We all know what he's like. Just watching that character growth is very, very well done. I can't give this movie enough praise for how it handles the characters. It's so good, man. Another thing I really liked about this movie is how, if you don't know, the main villain of the movie, it's not Megatron. It is, like, he's the villain by the end of it, but he's not really the villain of the movie. The main antagonist throughout the entire movie is Sentinel Prime. And I just really like that he's basically just Homelander from The Boys. Like, that's basically exactly what he is. Like, to most Cybertronians, he's this symbol of hope, someone they can look up to and aspire to be. But in reality, he's a poser and the biggest pile of crap imaginable, because he murdered all the Primes and is basically just now making himself look like the hero, when in reality he's just a huge fraud and a murderer. Also, John Hamm plays him very well. Sentinel is really good in this movie too. Also, as a diehard Transformers Prime fan, it was cool to, number one, see Arachnid in a movie. That was dope. But also hear the score by Brian Tyler in the scene where they're discovering, like, the corpses of all the Primes. It's the same music that played in the finale of Transformers Prime whenever Bumblebee, like, dies. It was really cool to hear that, like, in a movie theater. That is probably one of my favorite movie-going experiences I've had in the past year. It was really neat. But I could sit here and go on and on and on about all the things I loved about this movie. Like, there's certain things I haven't even talked about yet that I wanted to get into, like the designs. Everyone in this movie looks sick. The art style, it's a beautiful movie. It's like all the colors are very vibrant. It's a very nice looking movie. But there's something else I want to talk about. So I'm just gonna move on to that. So you remember earlier when I was talking about how leading up to the movie, before I saw it, the marketing had me worried for it? After having seen the movie, it has become apparent to me, and apparently many other people, just how bad the marketing was. They were trying to sell you on a completely different movie. If you looked at the trailers for Transformers 1, you would think it was just this super family-friendly, like, Transformers movie that you would take your 5-year-old to see, which it is that. It is family-friendly, and you could take your 5-year-old to see it, and they would likely enjoy it. But the trailers made it seem like that's all it was. But it's more of a family movie with, like, actually more mature themes throughout it. Like, one of the core plot points in this movie is classism. Because, to dumb it down a bit, basically, there are a lot of Cybertronians, and they are miners. They mine for energon to fuel the planet. They are the working class citizens of Cybertron, and they are discriminated against and seen as lesser by the higher-ups, by the people higher up in society on Cybertron, like Sentinel Prime, Arachnid, the racers. So that's like a core point of the movie, is classism. That is nowhere to be seen in the trailer. I mean, it kind of is, but it's played off as like a joke. It's not really like it's not something you'd even look twice at in the trailers, but in the movie it is very clear that that's what it is, and it's very important in the movie. So I don't know who made the trailers or who gave the okay to make sure that's what the first thing everyone saw from this movie was, but they need to be fired because they're selling you on a completely different movie. It's not the trailers are not even close to selling what the tone of this movie is for most of it. It's ridiculous. And by the way, this isn't even a new thing for Paramount. I don't know if you guys remember, but back when Transformers Rise of the Beast was coming out, I made a video about how terrible the marketing for that movie was too. It was terrible in a different way though. This movie, the trailers, the tone was wrong. They were selling you on a completely different movie. For Rise of the Beasts, there just barely was any marketing at all. They released the first trailer in December of 2022. Then they released a 30-second Super Bowl ad in February of 2023. And aside from that 30-second Super Bowl ad, from December until April, there was nothing. There was not a second trailer. There was not a TV spot. There was not collaborations with anything. Nothing. They released the first trailer, then it was, aside from that Super Bowl ad, dead silence until April, which was like 2 months before the movie came out. So I'm starting to believe that Paramount just absolutely sucks at marketing their movies. And it doesn't help that they're doing this with the Transformers franchise, which already people have a bad taste left in their mouth from the last Michael Bay movie. So there's that, combined with the fact that they're not marketing things correctly, and this franchise is just suffering for it because they're incompetent. Man, Transformers fans cannot catch a break sometimes. It's hard out here, man. But you know what? With all that said, at least there's one man out there trying his damnedest to market this movie. I don't know if y'all I've seen this guy, but if you're on Twitter and you follow anything even remotely related to Transformers, you've probably seen him. TF Hype Guy. He's under every tweet, trying his hardest to market this movie because Paramount's not doing it. I feel like he's probably gotten more people to see this movie than any of the trailers did. And you know what? Just good on him. He's out here fighting the good fight. But if I were to wrap up this video, I'd say that Transformers 1 is a very, very well done love letter to this franchise. It is very clear when watching it that the people who made it cared about this franchise, are fans of it, and wanted to make something great that people will love. And I loved it. I think more people should go out to watch it because it really is great. Like, even if you've never seen anything Transformers related, this movie is a great jumping on point for you. It's an origin story. Like, there probably isn't a better place to start, in all honesty. If you've ever had a single, even the tiniest bit of interest in this franchise, I would suggest going to see this one in theaters because it is a very good time. It's a very well-made movie. Just very, very good. But guess that's all I've got for you today. See ya.